So welcome everybody to this video. We're going to look in this video at analysing a marketing related news story. So often as students you will be asked to either analyse a news story or analyse an academic article. And I thought that the news story would be a good thing for us to look at together. And what makes reading something marketing related in the news so interesting is that you see what's happening in practice. So the news article is generally about, more often than not in the free press, about talking about what's actually happening in practice in marketing. And then it's really interesting to go through that and then see how that relates to theory. So how does it relate to some of the conceptual ideas that you've learned in class? How does it relate to some of your textbooks? And for those of you who delve further into the academic literature, how does what's happening in this news article particularly tie in to what is happening in the theory? And it's very important to be able to understand this concept of bringing practice together with theory, but it's something that takes a long time to learn. So the purpose of this video is just sort of a starting point. It's how to look at a news article, how to go through it, how to analyze it, and then how to frame your thinking in terms of bringing this together with theory. So we're going to look now at an article that was published actually in 2015 in The Economist. We're going to look at this together and we're going to think about how we want to analyze it. Okay, everybody, so here we've got our article on that we got from The Economist in 2015. It's 2015 article, as you can see. It's called Marketing in the Digital Age, a brand new game. So if you want to access this yourselves, you can just Google the title of the article and you'll find it. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go through this article myself, reading it slowly, and then I'm going to simply highlight areas that are of interest or what I think are areas which are related to particular marketing elements. And I'll talk you through some of it, but I'll also just be reading and highlighting. So just feel free to hit the pause button and be going through it at the same time yourselves, but take your time to go through it at a pace that suits you. So let me just pick up the highlighter here, and we can see that it's marketing. We can see it's something to do with branding, and we can see that it's to do with social media and advertising. So we'll go on through reading this slowly and see what the article is about. So I've highlighted already, bruised a few egos. We can see there that has got something to do with the impact of this campaign on consumer behaviour. So let me just make myself a little note here, which I can put impact on consumer behaviour. And I can close that. Okay, so moving on. So we're talking about the difficulties of advertising, the complex nature of advertising, and the fact that dissatisfied customers can make their voices heard. So if I put a note there to myself, we're talking here about negative word of mouth. So that's something of interest there. And they're finding it difficult to reach customers in the right way. So we can put a little note here. difficulty with targeting. Okay. See, I've highlighted this to alert myself to different social media platforms. So this is interesting. Advertisers like social media platforms because they gather all sorts of data on users' age, consumption patterns. So we can, we can highlight this. This. We can put a note. On data mining, gathering consumer data. Okay, so fine-tuned targeting. And advertising. Advertising in e-commerce. Okay, so how many consumers want such a convenience? Put a note to ourselves. So, so consumer behavior. Seeking. So here we can see an example of really fine-tuned target marketing. And that's very important that we note this because we've talk often in marketing about over targeting and the problems associated with over targeting. So it's very interesting that that is raised here in this article. Okay. Marketing G's also need to think through efforts to give online personalities. Also very interesting. Brand personality. So if we see this here, the fact that DiGiorno Pizza got their message wrong, that can be known as the dark side of digital advertising. So when things go wrong, it's also important to recognize this as a concept in marketing. So this is about some old media have yet to feel much pain from the loss of this is the idea of when traditional advertising meets digital advertising. So out with the old and in with the new, so to speak. Traditional versus digital advertising. TV audiences are declining through things like Netflix. Yeah, so that's all about the newness of digital advertising. And that's interesting. Objective first mover advantage in digital advertising space. Okay. Okay, and then we come to the end of our article, and we highlight that because this is talking about the idea of balancing traditional advertising with digital, which is a challenge for digital advertising managers. Okay, so that's the end of the article. So we've highlighted some key areas, as we can see, and we've made some notes for ourselves. So we'll have a closer look now at sort of the broader issues of this article. What is this article about? So let's have a think about this. Thinking broadly, what is this article telling us? So once we've finished our analysis and really looking at the article carefully and highlighting those areas that were of interest and which we could identify as being clearly related to the marketing literature and the marketing theory, we can sort of just take a step back and say, well, what do we think this article was about, and identify sort of some key areas and some big sort of more of a, I call it an umbrella view of the key elements of the paper. So you won't necessarily come up with the same things that I came up with, but here's what I came up with. So once we've decided what the key ideas are, then we can start to develop our analysis from there on. So once you've done your sort of umbrella analysis and looked at the broad concepts that you think the article is about, it's worth then, before you think about even writing up your analysis or your piece that you want to put together, then have a look back at some of the ideas that you collated. So think about those notes that I was making as we went along with the line-by-line analysis of the article. And this just helps to provoke thinking and really push that depth of thought, because that's what we're looking for from students who've been really thinking carefully about the issues at hand. So go back to the notes that you made when you were looking at the article, and just again thinking towards your textbook, thinking towards what you've learned in class. Are there some other areas that you can just dig a little deeper with? So take a few minutes at this stage just to stop and think about what else was perhaps going on there. So as I say, looking back over your notes, thinking a little bit more deeply about other concepts that you have the umbrella concepts, but then you have concepts that require more thought, and these are the ones that are going to really get you extra marks. So this is just a list that I came up with of other things that we had going on, but you probably have come up with different things, and there's no right and wrong here. As I say, it's about pushing your thought process. So I came up with the marketing concepts of consumer behavior, online PR and advertising, personalization, brand personality, of course, brand reputation. What happens when the brand does something, like in the case of DiGiorno Pizza, in terms of reputation and image? Marketing budgeting, the marketing manager or whoever's in charge of the account has a limited budget. How do they allocate those resources when it comes to allocating resources across digital and traditional media? The promotion mix, of course, is also very prevalent. And then as a bonus, some of you may even have considered the concept of privacy personalization paradox, of which there is a lot of stuff on that in the literature. So that's just my list, and you will have your own list. So once you've got these ideas, you've got your main ideas, and then you've drilled a little deeper and looking at less obvious ideas. It's time then for you now to write up. So let's have a think about how do we go about this. So here's how I suggest you get started with writing your analysis. You're going to want to decide on the areas that you want to cover in your writing. And with an article like the one I've shown you here, there's a lot of different things that you can choose to discuss, but a really good, concise piece of writing will just pick out sort of 3 or 4 perhaps of the key issues which you want to discuss. And once you've decided what are those areas that you want to look at, so those key areas, you'll start off, you'll have your introduction, which will look at the article on the whole, which will explain a little bit about what the article covers. Then you'll pick sort of 3 or 4 key items or key areas or conceptual areas that you want to discuss as they relate to marketing. And then you'll end with a short conclusion, perhaps with some recommendations for managers, or perhaps with what insights we've gathered, how they may be useful in practice. So you always have an opportunity to just put some ideas of your short piece of your own ideas at the end. But in terms of the main body of your analysis, I propose you create a table for yourselves and you pick out the key areas that you want to cover. And I've just chosen these areas, which you can see here as an example. And then I've consulted with my textbooks and I've done a very quick search of the academic literature. I've gone on to EBSCO. I've plugged in some keywords such as digital advertising framework or personalization privacy paradox, these kind of things, and just plug in some keywords and pick out some articles that you like the looks of, that you think can inform your analysis nicely. And I've just given you an example for each concept I've chosen with one reference. You'll probably want to have 2 or 3 really nice references for each concept that you want to discuss, and then you're going to write about that concept as it relates to the article and as it relates to your academic literature. So whether it's a framework from your textbook or whether it's something from an article that you've read, in the pieces that you're writing, you have to pull these 2 ideas together. And I suggest doing it as I show you here in the form of a table, and that will really help you to bring theory together with practice. So once you've gathered all your resources and you're happy with the academic literature that you've chosen or the frameworks that you've identified in your textbooks, then you're ready to write up. And this is just an example of how to write up. You will be, if you're given an assignment, then you will follow the brief of your assignment. This is just an idea in terms of writing up a short analysis of a news article. So it would start with a short introduction, which we talked about earlier, and there you would include your umbrella concepts. This article is about X, Y, and Z. Then you would go into your main paragraphs, which I talked about earlier. This is when you really choose the concepts that you've clearly identified for yourself, the literature that you've chosen, and then you will go through this process of linking what you found in the literature together with the ideas that we extracted, that we highlighted in our article at the beginning of this video. Don't forget to use references. Check the referencing style that you are asked to use, whether it's Harvard referencing style or Chicago referencing style. Make sure you use, in fact, the style that you've been told to use. Referencing is very important. And then you'll finish off with a conclusion, which will be looking back on what you've learned. What did you learn from the theory? Was there something new that you could bring perhaps in order to make some recommendations, or what are the implications based on your analysis? And that's it, you're ready, you're good to go. So I really hope you found this useful, and that you've enjoyed going on this sort of journey through the video of how really getting your confidence in analysing an article. So thank you very much for watching.